What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about why King Henry VIII executed his wives. To be honest, us Americans, we do learn a bit about British history in school, but I don't remember anything about anyone killing all their wives. And by the way, wives? Like plural? Like multiple killing of the wives? Well, I don't know. Maybe that was just kind of his thing, but I'm very, very curious now to find out. So let's take a look.
An infamous mnemonic device to remember the fate of all 6 of King Henry VIII's wives goes as follows. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived.
What is this? This is a way to remember how King Henry VIII killed his wives? Why would you want to remember? Why would you make a little poem out of this? This is just morbid. This is just dark. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived? 2 divorced, 2 beheaded, my God. 1 just died and, 1 survived. That's nice. There was one of them,
Needless to say, King Henry had a less than favorable reputation when it comes to the subject of his personal life. Though we often look back and think of him as the overweight tyrant he became in his later years, it can be easy to forget that he had once been a well-liked, good-looking, athletic celebrity in his youth.
Really? I gotta be honest, especially, I think I speak for a lot of Americans when I say it's really tough for us to keep track of all the British kings and queens. There's a lot of them. I feel like a lot of them are named Henry. Is King Henry VIII particularly famous? Or maybe for this, maybe for this story, maybe for this reason. But he was well loved at first, before he started killing everybody. Maybe not everybody, but his own wives? My God.
He was, at the time of the early 16th century, a popular, charismatic figure, and the most eligible prince in Europe. So how did this promising young monarch become so cruel and end up executing 2 of his wives? Henry VIII took the throne in 1509, and this was also when he married his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. If you watched our other video, The Worst Breakup in History, then you probably already know how this marriage ended.
The worst breakup in history? What the... I didn't know, that kings of England had such drama, such interesting lives on. Maybe that's why there's television shows about all this stuff.
Though Catherine wasn't executed, her pride was damaged when she was ostracized and humiliated by her public rejection from the king. So why did he treat her that way? To understand what was going through Henry's mind, we must remember that he was a product of his time. During this period in history, it was imperative that Henry produce a son and heir to inherit the throne. And Catherine had only been able to deliver 1 girl, the future Queen Mary I. The rest of their children had either been miscarried or stillborn. In Tudor England, image was everything.
Wow, so this was literally back in the days where if you were the wife of the king, he might cast you aside just because you can't produce a male heir for him. That's pretty sick.
And a failure to produce a male heir was a direct hit against Henry's fragile ego. His masculinity felt threatened, and he wanted to ensure that everyone knew it wasn't his fault. He had portraits and sketches of himself drawn to exaggerate his masculine features, made him look taller, and add in a large bulge under his outfit to emphasize the size of his, well, private area.
What? Is this real? Is this serious? Is this legit? Like, actually? It's like catfishing back in the hundreds of years ago. Like lying on your online dating profile. He had portraits of himself with exaggerated features. So this is why he ended up having lots of wives. And by the way, it sounds like he didn't actually execute all of them, just some of them. So that's good.
He participated in many sports such as hunting, jousting, and tennis. He wanted to make it known that he was a strong leader and the epitome of virility. So it was easier to place the blame on Catherine than to confront the possibility that he could have any shortcomings of his own.
Right.
We think the greatest influential factor for leaving his first wife, however, came from the seductive powers of one woman, Anne Boleyn. It is very possible that Anne Boleyn was
Anne Boleyn. I feel like I've heard of Anne Boleyn. I'm so bad at British history, but that name sticks out to me.
aware of the king's insecurities and that she played them to her advantage. Very well, we might add. Some say she was motivated by family ambition. She appealed to his vanity while simultaneously keeping him wanting more. She did this by denying his advances. When Henry would buy her expensive gifts, she'd refuse them. She was
playing hard to get. Once again, some of this stuff is just timeless. Lying on your dating profile, playing hard to get. I thought this was all modern day dating and stuff. This is just timeless.
playing hard to get in a very high-stakes game. In hindsight, though, this was an ingenious tactic for alluring the king, because it fueled his interest and caused him to be completely infatuated with her, practically to the point of worship. There are some claims that the traditional English song Greensleeves was composed by King Henry VIII for his love of Anne, mainly due to the lyrics "Cast me off discourteously," which are
Is this his second wife then? She seduced him, playing hard to get, but does he end up executing her? Why? That's this question I still have, though. What I can understand, his twisted reasons for divorcing his wives, but why kill them,
thought to refer to Anne's initial rejection of him. This, however, is only speculation, since there's no real definitive evidence for the origin of the tune. Nevertheless, once Anne Boleyn entered the picture, Queen Catherine had to go. Anne Boleyn promised to grant Henry the son and heir he desperately wanted, a very tempting bargaining chip, but only if he made her his wife and queen.
Oh boy, maybe this is what it is. Like, she promised him that she would make a son, something you don't have any control over. She has a 50-50 shot. I'm guessing this doesn't go well for her. She should never have promised that. Oh my gosh.
She would not settle for less and would also not enter his bed, refusing to sleep with him until his first wife was out of the way. Henry moved mountains to divorce his first wife, motivated by his lust for Anne. When he failed to get approval from the Pope, Henry took matters into his own hands. He established his own church, the Church of England, and separated England from the Roman Catholic Church. This caused division in his country, the start of a feud between Catholic citizens and Protestants.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Seriously? This is the wildest story I've ever heard. Seriously. You can't make this up. He wanted to divorce his first wife, but the church wouldn't grant it. So he just made a new church. Just king stuff, no big deal.
Henry then granted himself his divorce and married Anne. Once they were married, however, Anne Boleyn's powerful hold over the king started to slip from her grasp. She had the title that she wanted, but no longer possessed her bargaining chip to play, and there was intense pressure on both Henry and Anne to produce a son, especially now that he had uprooted his entire country just to be with her. Anne did fall pregnant and give birth to a healthy baby, but it was a girl, the future Queen Elizabeth I.
Oh, Queen Elizabeth I. Can't he just be happy with that? Like, oh, she should never have promised this. Oh, that is so crazy how he is flipping the country upside down just to marry Anne Boleyn.
Henry was bitterly disappointed, and Anne would start sliding on a downward slope from there. After this, Anne's future pregnancies would end in 2 more miscarriages, which made her increasingly vulnerable. Her influence on the king waned, and she was in a very precarious situation. It's easy to imagine that she would have been feeling intensely stressed by this point.
Intensely stressed, sure, but it really sounds like she put herself in this situation. Like, that's how it comes across. Like, she sort of did this to herself to become queen, and this was a very real possibility,
calling what happened to her predecessor, Catherine. It can be speculated that based on the unique circumstances of how they came together, Henry may have felt a certain level of resentment against Anne for pushing him to the point of dividing his country, separating from Rome. When she...
Right. He did all this. I mean, that's not on Anne. Like, he did all this crazy stuff, dividing his country, separating the church. Like, that's him. He did that. So that's actually kind of troll that he is blaming Anne for all that, and not good for her, though.
Couldn't keep her end of the bargain by providing him with an heir, this must have delivered another humiliating blow to Henry's image. He was also growing increasingly older, impatient, and more desperate to have a son. Additionally, Henry's interest was being redirected toward another woman named Jane Seymour. The foundation of his relationship with Anne was falling apart.
He's already moving on. He's already moving on to the next. Jane Seymour, I've never heard of her.
His downfall hit rock bottom when she was attacked with accusations of committing adultery with multiple men, including her own brother. Supporters of Anne Boleyn today would argue the possibility that these treacherous offenses were fabricated to eliminate Anne from the scene, possibly so that Henry could start fresh with his new love, Jane. After all, a lot of the evidence that was used against Anne seemed a little phony. Innocent actions such as dancing with her brother were used as testimony. At the time...
Dancing with her brother was proof that she was cheating with him? I don't know. It's kind of scary back in the day, where we didn't have like the modern day courts and justice system, and I don't know. It sounds like back in this day, accusations were like taken as key pieces of testimony, and your reputation could be ruined just by hearsay, really.
Though no one would have been bold enough to jump to Anne's defense, and there were a lot of people who resented her for the shameful treatment of Catherine of Aragon. Even the fact that Anne had alibis for 12 of the occasions when she was thought to be committing adultery didn't seem to matter. Though she was never actually on trial for witchcraft, there was a myth circulating that she had bewitched the king into marrying her. There was nothing that Anne could do or say at this point to prevent her fate, as her once strong influencing power over the king was now entirely obsolete.
Oh my gosh, this happened so quickly. All of a sudden, you're the queen, you're living it up. Next thing you know, they're saying you slept with your brother, you danced with your brother, and they want to chop your head off.
Anne was executed in May 1536 after only 3 years of marriage. Henry ordered a skilled French swordsman to do the job so that the beheading would be quick and painless. We suppose that in a twisted way, this was a final gesture of love. This made Anne Boleyn the first English queen to be executed. So how could Henry switch from being head over heels in love with someone to then having her killed? Well, aside from the factors already discussed, there's another idea in the mix, a possible medical explanation. Many experts blame a jousting accident that Henry endured, which occurred at a tournament at Greenwich Place on the 24th of January 1536, not long prior to Anne's execution. His horse fell on top of him and he was unconscious for 2 long hours. This serious accident...
What? Really? There's a lot of Anne defenders that say she didn't do anything. It does kind of sound like a botched, sort of made-up trial that really just benefited the king. But also, the king might not have been in his right mind because he was kicked in the head by a horse. Again, this is just history. This sounds like such a fascinating story. Like, it sounds like something made up, but truth is stranger than fiction sometimes.
It reportedly caused a personality change in Henry, whereby he transformed dramatically from being sporty and generous to cruel and tyrannical. According to the History Channel documentary Inside the Body of Henry VIII, this accident could well have caused undetected brain damage in Henry, turning him into the tyrant we think of today.
Is that I mean, it sounds like he was really beloved and then really hated. Maybe this is kind of true that this happened.
So, could brain damage have pushed Henry to execute his second wife? If we had today's medical knowledge and technology somehow magically transported back in time to examine him, perhaps then we could know for sure. Just over a week after Anne was beheaded, Henry quickly moved on and married his mistress, Jane Seymour. Who knows what Jane was thinking?
Wait, did they say a week?
Quickly moved on and married his...
How long?
Then we could know for sure. Just over a week after Anne was beheaded, Henry...
a week later, a week after he executed his wife, he was already on to the next one? Really?
Henry quickly moved on and married his mistress, Jane Seymour. Who knows what Jane was thinking? Knowing what happened to the previous queen, it's easy to imagine that anyone would be frightened to be in her shoes.
Yeah.
Luckily for her, she gave birth to a son,
Oh.
the future King Edward VI of England. After
Oh, she did it. It's just, I don't know, at this point it's just like odds and probabilities that one of them would have a son. She's just the lucky one, I guess.
the childbirth, however, Jane died from postnatal complications.
Oh.
She was
Never mind. She is not the lucky one. She died from complications of childbirth. Childbirth was so dangerous back in the day. Oh my god, so many miscarriages we're hearing about in this story, and she just straight up died after giving birth. It is really sad.
said to be Henry's favorite wife of them all, but that may have been only because she didn't live long enough for him to grow tired of her. That and
Yeah.
she delivered him a son, of course. Unbeknownst to Henry, however, Edward would die not long after him. While in the process of searching for a new wife, Christina of Denmark was considered, but she refused the offer, supposedly saying to the English ambassador, "Had I but 2 heads, I would gladly put one at his disposal."
No, seriously though, like who in their right mind would marry King Henry after all this? 3 of his wives, no, 1 was just divorced. 2 have died. 1 was from natural causes. 1 had their head chopped off. Still, I wouldn't like my odds. But you do get to be queen. I can see how that's kind of enticing, but you might have your head chopped off. So I don't know. It's you gotta choose, I guess.
Wife number 4 turned out to be the Tudor version of an online dating experience gone wrong. Henry was shown a portrait of Anne of Cleves, but when he met her personally, he felt that the artist had not accurately represented her image. Henry was very vocal about this, angrily expressing that he found her to be hideous and undesirable. At one point, he
Oh my god. He saw a portrait of her? A portrait. And was like, yeah, I'll marry her. He didn't even see her in real life first? And he should talk. Like, he had portraits of himself made where he was exaggerated. His features exaggerated. He did the exact same thing on purpose. He's a hypocrite.
allegedly mentioned that she looked like a horse. Still, Henry was forced to go through the marriage under political pressure to avoid endangering his alliance with the Germans. The couple's first night as husband and wife was a total disaster. He was recorded saying, "I liked her before not well, but now I like her much worse." Unsurprisingly, the marriage was soon annulled under the grounds that it was never consummated. Despite the insult,
Yeah, well, she should consider herself lucky. The marriage was just annulled. That's probably the best case scenario.
over the appearance, Anne of Cleves was arguably granted the best ending out of all of Henry's wives. She was ordained the title as the king's beloved sister, and provided with a generous settlement, which included Richmond Palace and Hever Castle, home
Okay.
to Henry's prior in-laws, the Boleyns.
What? She actually got the best deal out of all this.
Anne of Cleves was smart enough not to argue against this transaction, gracefully relinquishing her title as queen. Who could blame her? Knowing what Henry was capable of with his past actions against his previous wives,
Yeah.
anyone in her position would have probably done the same.
Yeah.
The next queen to be executed was Henry's fifth wife, Catherine Howard. By this time, Henry was 50, had a nasty ulcerated wound on his leg, and his girth had greatly increased. Needless to say, he had become very unappealing from the attractive young king he'd once been. Though her
What? Why is he executing her? we're just already on to the next wife, on to the next execution, like it's just normal or something.
Her exact birth date is unknown. Catherine Howard was only in her early teens when she was married to the king, and the contrast would be disturbing by today's standards. Still, she managed to amuse the king, and he loved her madly, calling her his rose without a thorn, and spoiling her with lavish gifts. Catherine, however, had many secret affairs and liaisons with other men, as well as having a less than wholesome past with her sexuality.
Why on earth would you marry the king and then cheat? Have all these escapades with other men and be unfaithful? Are you crazy? Like, of all the people to do that to, you're going to do that to King Henry, who's known to execute his wives in the past for less. Why would you do this?
Her flirtations could probably be construed as understandable, though, since it would have only been natural for her to want to be with boys her own age, rather than the old smelly king that she was stuck being married.
Sure. Maybe she's justified, but for her own well-being, she probably shouldn't.
Married to. Her affairs, however, turned out to be a huge mistake that would ultimately lead to her downfall once word spread and suspicion grew. At first, Henry denied the initial accusations against her. He thought her innocent and didn't want to believe otherwise. As the evidence increasingly stacked up, there could be no denying her infidelity. Henry was heartbroken and infuriated. Upon her arrest, it's thought that Catherine broke free from her guards and ran screaming down the corridor towards Chapel Royal at Hampton.
Oh, this is so disturbing. It's disturbing. Like, this is all a cartoon. We're seeing it in, like, these funny little cartoons. Imagining this happening in real life, like, you're this poor little girl forced to marry the king as a teenager, screaming or running down the castle halls for her life. Like, it's disturbing if you think about it, like, literally.
Court Place in 1541. She screamed for mercy, but to no avail. Today, this corridor is said to be haunted, and some speculate that her ghost can be seen and heard begging for her life during that moment of utter desperation. Unlike her cousin and Henry's second wife, Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard wasn't graced with the mercy of a master swordsman to perform her execution. Instead, she was placed under the axe. Henry's sixth...
What? Oh my god. So, it might have not been a clean cut that chopped her head off? What?
And final wife, Catherine Parr, was fortunate enough to outlive him, but not without its fair share of scares. There were rumors about her reading banned religious books. Appealing to Henry's ego was what ended up keeping her alive in the end. She was said to appease him through self-deprecating tactics, stating, "I am but a woman, with all the imperfections natural to the weakness of my sex," and claiming that she yearned for his wisdom. Henry accepted her explanation.
Oh, you know what? That'd be like a big, that'd be difficult to make yourself do, but I admire her hustle. I admire her, like, doing what she had to do to make sure she survived, and in a way, she was just outsmarting the king by just telling him lies about what he wanted to hear, so that might be why she survived.
At this point in his life, his health was deteriorating, and he probably also felt fed up and tired with the idea of re-entering the dating scene. What do you think about this story? Which one of...
Oh my god, that's it. What do I think of this story? I don't... That's crazy. That's crazy. Like, that actually happened? That's a historical story. I had no idea. British history is fascinating. It's like a reality TV show at times. I just thought this was a crazy little story. Why did the King of England execute his wives? I was like, what? And I'm leaving this going, what? But I did enjoy this all the same. Anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on King Henry VII and his 6 wives, or any other interesting British history stories maybe I should check out. That'd be fun to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Britain and British culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.